The next topic that we will deal with are control flow statements. Control flow statements in a program are statements that redirect or control the way the program moves from one statement to another while it is executing. Usually, most programs have some elements of repetition or decision making in them. What I mean is, there might be points in program where you may want to ask input from the user, perform some actions, and go back to asking input from the user. You might want to perform this operation over and over again. Or you might have questions to ask from users, such as, are you sure you want to do this? And take one action versus another based on the user response. Programmatic constructs that allow you to perform repetitive actions or conditional actions are known as control flow statements. There are two kinds of control flow statements: loops and loops that help us perform repetitive statements, and the second one are conditional statements that allow us to take conditional actions. Let's first tackle loops. This is how loop runs. You specify a Boolean condition, and while the condition remains true, the statements within the loop body keep running. When the condition becomes false, the program exits the loop. Now let's look at this in context of some real code. Now let's look at the three different kind of loops here. The first one is the while loop. A while loop runs while the Boolean expression supplied to it remains true. So here initially we made the variable I equals 0, and then here we are evaluating whether I is less than 5. Since I is indeed less than 5, it will enter what is called the body of the loop. So all loop have this concept of a body which starts with a curly brace and then finishes up with the ending curly brace. So we enter the while loop because this condition is true, then we do whatever is in the body of the loop, we finish up, and then we go back and evaluate the Boolean expression again. This keeps on happening until the condition here does not remain true anymore. So as you can see here on line number 5, each time we execute the body of the loop, we increment the variable I. So eventually I will go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, 4, and it will become 5, at which point of time it will exit this loop and continue on at line number 7. The second kind of statements, the loop statements, are called for loop statements. For loop statements are predominantly numeric counter based. So the way a for loop is set up is you have something called an initialization statement, which is executed exactly once when you enter the loop. And then this is the comparison statement or the Boolean expression, and this is the increment phase. So the way the for loop works is you enter the for loop, one time only you execute this initialization statement, then you do the evaluation of the whatever Boolean expression has been supplied to the for loop, you execute the body of the loop, then you go back and increment whatever variable you have, counter you have, then you go back and evaluate it again. Note this time that we skipped this first part. So the first part is executed exactly once. Now the third kind of loops are called do while loops, and do while loops are usually used when you want to perform some action at least one time before evaluating the Boolean condition. So here as you can see we have the do, and then this portion here gets executed for sure, and then the Boolean condition is evaluated at the end. So this will guarantee that the body of the loop gets executed one time at least. Now let's see how this code would run and perform. Alright, so let's run this program using Node. You can see that the while loop executes 5 times and prints the various values. The same goes for the for loop and then the do while loop. So that is how the loops actually work. Now that you have seen the three kind of loops, it is important to remember that functionally all three are equivalent. You can represent all three loops in terms of each other. Sometimes it's just a bit easier or cleaner to write some piece of code using one versus the other. There are no hard and fast guidelines. So use whatever seems easy or natural. Now that we are done with the loops, let's tackle the conditional statements. You can write a simple if statement which will let you conditionally execute a set of statements when the supplied Boolean condition is true. can also write an if-else statement, which intuitively performs the code supplied in the if block if the if statement is true, or the code supplied in the else block if the Boolean expression in the if statement is false. You can chain if and else statements. So to make this a bit more concrete, let's look at the if-else or conditional statements over here. Now what we have here is, you can see we declared a variable x equals 10 at line 21, and then we are saying if, and this is the Boolean expression that is being evaluated, and if this expression is true, then we will enter the if block, and if this statement is not true, then we will enter the else if block. Remember I said, I mean, you have the option of either putting just an if statement or putting an if statement followed by an else statement, i.e. you can just ignore this portion. You can just write an if and then an else, or you can chain them together by saying if and then else, and the else you can write another if statement, and then you can finally terminate it with an else statement. So here we are saying if initially we assigned the value x to be 10, then we are saying if x is greater than 10, then print this one. If x is less than 10, then print this one. If neither of these conditions are true, then print this one. In this case, since x was originally assigned to be 10, x will not be greater than 10 and x will not be less than 10. So this is what will get printed. If you look at the output, you can see that indeed here is what got printed. Now if and else or if else if kind of constructs which are chained together are not the only way of writing conditional statements. There is yet another way of writing conditional statements that is called a switch. So if you look here between lines 33 and 41, this is what a switch statement looks like. So what you would usually do is say switch and put a condition, put a variable in here, and then you have case and then various values that this particular variable can take. So for example, here initially we assign value 5 to the variable y, and then we are saying take this value and compare it against all the case statements that are present. So this switch block will cause this variable y to be compared to 1. If y is equal to 1, then the statement here will start getting executed. You can put more than one statements here, and they will keep getting executed until they hit this break statement. Once a break is hit, the code will jump out of this loop and over here. If y is 5, then instead of hitting this particular case, we will actually enter the case statement on line 38, and we'll match this one. This statement will get executed, and then it will break out. So that is how a switch statement works. The last thing that I'm going to cover about the control flow statements is this special keyword called continue that is used in conjunction with loop statements. So here between lines 44 and 51, we have a for loop that's supposed to go 10 times, goes, or maybe 9 times, starts with variable z equals 1, and then while z is less than 10, it keeps on executing this loop. So inside you see if z is divisible by 2, we execute this statement called continue. What is this continue statement? The continue statement is a statement that makes the loop behave a little bit abnormally. What it does is, if the program is executing and hits a continue statement within a loop, it will forego the rest of the loop. It will not execute the rest of the loop. At this point of time, the execution will go back to the beginning of the loop. As in, as soon as you hit continue, it will go back and increment z again, and then come back within the loop. It will not do this console.log. So if we execute this, let's run it one more time. You can see here, every time z is 2, we are not executing this line 49 over here. We are saying printing only z equals 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, or only the odd values. Right? We are not executing the console.log for the even statements. So that is what the continue statement means. There are some people, some purists who really dislike the use of continue statements, and they say anything that a continue statement can do can be done in a slightly better way by refactoring your code and writing it in a slightly different manner. I personally am okay with continue. I use continue in my code. It's up to you to decide whether you would like to use this or not.